Iran has targeted bases belonging to Iranian Kurdish opposition groups based in neighboring Iraq. The strikes follow 2 months of nationwide anti-regime protests in Iran, which are backed by the Kurdish opposition. Those protests were sparked by the death of the Kurdish Iranian woman Gina Mahsa Amini after being detained and allegedly beaten by Iran's morality police. The opposition Democratic Party of Iranian Kurdistan said the Iranian military fired missiles and drones at bases in Iraq. It's the second time in 10 days Iran has targeted the groups. The Iranian military has also continued its crackdown on Kurdish regions in Iran. The Henga human rights group said security forces used live ammunition against people in the city of Javanrud. The group said at least 13 people had been killed in majority Kurdish cities in western Iran since Sunday. And the well-known actors Hengame Ghaziani, seen here in a video posted on her Instagram, and Katayun Riahi have been arrested after appearing in public without their headscarves in support of the protests. Let's try and weave those threads together and talk to my colleague Nilofar Gholami. She works for DW's Farsi department. Nilofar, let's start with those airstrikes in Iraq. Who are these Kurdish Iranian groups and how involved are they in the protests in Iran?
Yeah, as you mentioned, they are opposition groups and political parties based in Iraqi Kurdistan. And in fact, they are not involved in the ongoing protests, but supporting protesters and their demands for justice and for freedom, like all other Iranian groups, opposition groups and parties. But the Islamic Republic is always wants to blame them for every single civil movement in the cities and provinces with Kurdish majority.
The most intense protests have actually been taking place in these Kurdish majority areas inside of Iran. What's the situation there?
According to reports and what as you mentioned, and published by human rights organizations like Hengav, like Kurdish human rights organizations, there is a massive suppression going on in cities like Mahabad, like Piranshah, Javanrud, Bukhan, and other even small cities in the region. And there are many videos on social media which we covered in our department as well that show war weapon tanks and troops that have been sent there, and human rights defenders are warning about a massacre there. At least it's officially at least 14 citizens killed there and many more wounded, and many people, many activists and citizens and protesters arrested.
And the crackdown against protesters seems to only be intensifying, doesn't it? This weekend, we saw another demonstrator sentenced to death over his participation in the protest. How is this affecting the movement?
As a journalist, following every single event that happened in Iran, I have spoken to many people inside and have read their words on social media. The fact is that they are still hopeful and trying to encourage more people joining this revolution. It is the word that they use to describe this movement. And despite all the oppression and killings, they're still in the streets every day and night, and even in small cities fighting for their basic rights.
We've seen reports of 2 famous actors arrested for taking off their headscarves in solidarity with the protesters. Can you tell us a little more about them and why the regime would want to make an example out of them?
Yeah, actually, the 2 actors are now in custody, and with the accusations like assembly and collusion with the intention of acting against the national security, which this may lead them long prison sentences. And as you mentioned, the regime really wants to make an example out of them to scare other people, scare other celebrities that have not yet joined this movement, but they are willing to do so. So they want to scare more people.
It does seem like another prominent group that was undeterred by what is happening there, by the crackdown, might have been the Iranian national team. At their first World Cup match, they stayed silent during the national anthem. Are they likely to face consequences?
Actually, there are a lot of critics to what they have been doing in these days, and there might be consequences. But Iranian people in and outside the country, they expected more, and they think that the national team could have done more to support the protesters. And even in some parts of Tehran, there were some videos published that people were celebrating, gave chocolates to each other, because the team, which they call it the regime team, not the national team, lost this match with England.
Oh, wow. So they might have been fishing for some support and they didn't get it there. How much is all of this, what we've been seeing throughout the past weeks and months, putting the Iranian regime with its back against the wall? Are the authorities still in control of the narrative and the facts on the ground?
Actually, they do not control the society. They are still in power just because they have the tools and for oppressing their own citizens. And the fact is that after this killing of this 10-year-old boy Kian, the anger of the society has intensified, and even people who were unsure or former supporters of the regime do not accept the regime narrative on the events, especially on the killing of this 10-year-old boy. And I think that Iranian society owes this really to social media. And this is exactly why the regime is so afraid of social media, because they always want to be the main narrator and take control of the society. But this time, I think it's different, and they cannot do that for a long time.
Gholami, thank you so much. She's with DW's Farsi department.
Thank you for having me.